Good day there once again, viewers. This is your mate Kamikaze78 here, come to you guys with some more Planetside 2 content. So today folks, we're going to be checking out the NSR3 Swarm rocket launcher available to the Heavy Assault, a new magazine-fed semi-automatic lock-on rocket launcher that comes with multiple fire modes to give users more control over the rockets they fire, and can target both air and ground targets at the cost of lacking dumbfire capabilities. In order to add the Swarm to your rocket launcher arsenal, you're going to have to spend 1000 certs to unlock it for the character you make the purchase on, or you can make a 799 Daybreak coin investment to unlock the weapon on all current and future Planetside 2 characters you create on that account. But is this weapon even worth that kind of investment, or is it something that you should completely skip over and stick to the weapons you already use at this current given point in time on your Heavy Assault? Well, as far as the stats go, this weapon comes with a 3-round magazine that reloads in 3.7 seconds with no short or long reload time being present on the weapon. 3.7 seconds is the length of the reload every time. Now, in regards to the damage per rocket, the stats state that the maximum and minimum damage is 375, with the maximum indirect damage coming in at 750 before 0.35 meters, and the minimum indirect damage comes in at 1 after 5 meters. Now, to translate that into rockets to kill per vehicle, the Swarm kills a Flash in 2 rockets, a Harasser, ESF, or Valkyrie in 7 rockets, a Lightning in 11 rockets from the front or 7 rockets from the back, a Sunderer in 13 rockets, a Liberator in 18 rockets, a Mag Rider and a Prowler in 20 rockets from the front or 10 rockets from the back, a Vanguard in 23 rockets from the front and 11 rockets from the back, and a Galaxy in a whopping 29 rockets. So, as we can see here, the rockets to kill for this weapon tends to get a bit ridiculous after you plan on engaging anything above a Sunderer, and makes it fairly clear that this weapon is going to do nothing other than piss off the bigger vehicles when in the field. However, the most unique factor of this rocket launcher by far is the interchangeable fire mode that determines the way the rockets behave mid-flight on their way to the target. The first fire mode, known as the slow projectile mode, has the rockets move in a slower but more maneuverable fashion that allows for them to track fast or erratically moving targets more accurately. The second fire mode, known as the fast projectile mode, who would have guessed, has the rockets move in a much faster and more streamlined manner, sacrificing maneuverability for raw speed that results in almost instantaneous travel times to the target at some ranges. Now, with these two modes comes the greatest challenge present with this rocket launcher, and that is the decision on which fire mode should be used to engage a hostile at a certain point in time. You can't simply say with this rocket launcher that you're going to stick to the slow or fast moving projectile mode and get away with most situations. That's just not how this rocket launcher works. It truly does challenge you to decide which fire mode is going to be best for the situation at hand. When you get it right, it really does pay off, and when you get it wrong, it does a good job at punishing you terribly. Use the slow projectile rockets at the wrong time and the target will have enough time to put an obstacle between them and the rockets, or will have the opportunity to simply outrun the rockets. Use the fast projectile rockets at the wrong time and the rockets will straight up miss the target and plow into a mountainside or the ground after he or she made a fast enough turn. So the current question is, when do we make use of which fire mode? Well, based on my experience with the weapon thus far, it all depends on the behavior of the enemy and the terrain around them, which again makes learning this weapon just that little bit harder once again. General rule of thumb that I have managed to develop thus far is that if the target is behaving erratically, especially on the ground, then stick with the slow projectile fire mode, as this will give the rockets more ability to track the target. As you can see here in this clip, I used the fast projectile velocity to engage this harasser that was moving essentially perpendicular to me, and my rockets simply couldn't keep up with the angle that the harasser was moving on. They in fact missed him entirely, couldn't keep up with the turning angle, and flew straight into the ground. As I switched to the slow projectile speed fire mode, I was able to deal with the harasser a lot easier by comparison. However, if the target was at a further range, then I probably would have had a better chance at engaging him, as the rockets would have had more time to make that turn to match the harasser's angle. That is a little bit theoretical, but I believe that would have been the outcome if the harasser was at a further range. However, despite the slow projectile rockets being superior in regards to accuracy, sometimes they are a bit, well, too accurate. What I mean by this is that they would track the target and its predicted course so well to the point where it actually starts disregarding the fact that there is terrain in front of the rocket, and therefore my targets were actually driving the rockets into the terrain of the area. Because of this, I generally recommend that when the air target is at range, and when I say range I mean distance and not height, and is moving in a straight manner and is a fair distance away from any cover that they can make use of, then you should stick to the fast traveling projectiles. However, if an enemy aircraft is above you, definitely still remain to stick with the slow projectile fire mode, as it ensures a hit in this situation, as using the first projectile fire mode in the situation where the aircraft is right above you increases the chance in a miss, which could result in the rocket coming straight back down and potentially hitting the ground as it attempts to correct itself. When you're actually dealing with ground targets, the only time where I'd recommend switching up to the fast projectile fire mode is when you're dealing with stationary targets at a longer distance, such as a deployed Prowler or a Sundra, or when you are in a vastly open environment and the rockets barely have any terrain to run into. Now, even with these general rules in place, there are still many variables that come into play with this weapon, such as exact direction and speed of the enemy, how they are moving against the terrain, and how the rockets move in relation to the target, which can potentially throw things off, but at the end of the day, practice is the key to get the upper hand with this weapon against your targets, and with practice you'll begin to learn how the rockets handle, and how you can manipulate the rockets to hit your target every single time. And on the topic of manipulating your rockets, something else that can be accomplished with this rocket launcher is a curve rocket effect, where you gain lock on your target, and before you fire, quickly pull your aim off the target and then fire. This in turn launches the rocket on a new angle that also gives it a new angle of attack on the target, which can be very useful when it comes to dodging potential cover that the target may take advantage of. To draw up an example here, say you have an enemy tank sitting up on a hill slightly above you. Now, by locking onto him and firing straight away, the rockets will move in a direct way that may hit the hill if the target moves at all behind the hill. However, to avoid this, once you get a lock, if you pull your aim upwards slightly and quickly fire before you lose the lock, the rocket will have a slight bit more height over the enemy, which will in turn make taking cover behind the hill harder for him to accomplish. This technique can be applied very creatively to a lot of different situations and does take quite a bit of practice to master, but once you get the hang of it, it can be a very powerful tactic to take into consideration when using the R3 Swarm. Something else that I have to advise real quick here is that if you find yourself using the fast fire mode, do not go spamming the trigger of this weapon, as the cone of fire of the rocket launcher tends to get a bit out of control come the third shot, and if your rocket fires on even the slightest angle towards the ground, it will not have enough time to recover in the fast projectile fire mode. Just something to keep in mind when you're making the best of your 3 shots, and it's not something that you have to take into consideration, I find, when you're using the slow projectile mode. And folks, with all that said, that is going to wrap up today's video looking at the NSR3 Swarm rocket launcher available to the heavy assault in Planetside 2. If you guys went on to enjoy today's video, then a backhanding of that like button would be greatly appreciated, and if you're possibly new to the channel and you find yourself backhanding that like button, why don't you go around and backhand that subscribe button whilst you're at it? I promise you folks that there's a lot more content on its way to this channel on a regular basis, and I hope that you guys enjoy your stay for the long term. Feel free to leave your opinions on the Swarm in the comment section down below. Let's get a conversation started up about this. And as per always, there are a bunch of social media links in the description down below for you to use to get into contact with me. Once again, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.